Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank the organizing committee for choosing to include my paper this morning. I am excited to deliver this. People wonder what I do in my retirement and whether I have too much time on my hands. And I think this is proof that indeed I have too much time on my hands. I have a family. My son was informed by his wife that my grandson is going to be going into Little League baseball. And I am an armchair baseball fanatic. I quite enjoy the game. And my son said, "Can you teach me baseball? Can you teach Asher baseball? Because apparently I'm being told that this is going to be part of our family life." So I went to the Amazon. I saw what's out there to teach baseball. And there are a few games out there. Doesn't include pitching. Doesn't help distinguish between the different kinds of runs. Now, I know I'm speaking to a Dutch audience here. There are some Dutch MLB players, Major League Baseball players. But I'm not going to try and teach you baseball today. But suffice to say that the games that are available are not detailed enough for me to teach my grandson how baseball works. So it's not up to date. These games are not up to date with the latest rule changes from MLB. And they're all in English. Now, baseball is quite an international sport. Think of Latin America, think of Japan. So there's no teaching here of the Major League Baseball notation. And the notation is used in newspapers, it's used on the television screen. There are rules for what order the different information is presented. And so I got out my Inkscape. And I said, well, what if I had a playing surface like this? And I could conceive of two different versions of the game. One version would be a mimic of what's already currently available. And fascinating, all of these dice games use the same dice combinations for the same plays. So somewhere, someone came up with these dice combinations. Everybody's using them. So there's one version of my game that mimics the same role combinations. And then there's the teaching version of my game, which goes into far more detail. And I've got stolen bases or stealing bases and getting caught stealing, force out, and different fielders' choices, and all of these things that are nuances of baseball that I get to teach my grandson now, because we can sit at a table, and my thought was, print this off on paper, get a piece of foam from some shipping material, and use dress pins through the paper in order to play this game. And I spent a lot of time on the geometry of this. That playing field is quite close to the actual geometry of a baseball field. If you think about in here compared to the outfield, the infield size and all, that's actually pretty close to the actual sizes. Again, I'm not going to try and teach you baseball. Sorry, I'm so tempted to get into all of the details with you. But that's not what I wanted to talk with you about today, because SVG, I created all of this in SVG. SVG is XML, and I like XML. So I started getting some ideas. And what could I do with this paper version? Well, my son said, hey, guess what? Our local library offers free use to patrons of a laser cutter. And there are two aspects of a laser cutter. There is the rasterizing. 600 DPI, And on the laser across the page. These pieces are 1/8 inch. You burn on the surface, black and white, what you want. And so I was able to get all of the dice bit. Now, for that green holes there, I want actual holes. Well, the laser amps up its power, and it actually shape that you want, all in SVG. So now I had some tools that I could start getting carried away. And so I said, okay, I'll get to the XML in a bit, okay? So I said, well, okay, if I get some cribbage pegs and I burn holes in the board here, and you can see the scorch marks of the laser here, right? They're scorch marks. So this is rasterized content and then burned through holes of a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch piece of solid wood. An SVG file, I get to do that. Now, the way you specify when to cut is you specify a stroke width of 0.001 inches. And anything that's bigger than 0.001 inches, you just get the raster. But anything it finds that's 0.001, it burns, and it goes right through the wood. So, thankfully, I don't have to burn 2 sides of one piece of wood, because the holes just are on the other side. I don't have to burn the holes a second time. But I can just create 2 SVG files and have a backing to this front and have a piece of board. And I can do this in a single SVG file and then just expose layers and create the PDF files that I need in order to drive the printer. And you actually print using Acrobat, you print the PDF to a print driver that encodes the information that's needed to operate the raster driver. But I said, do I have to stop at this? No, I don't. So this is a version of the game made of 6 layers of solid wood. This is white birch. I've got earth magnets in there to help keep things on. And you set it up, and inside here I've got a container with dice, cradles for the dice, a hole for all of the cribbage pegs. And if it's going to be played with in the car, then you can throw the dice into the compartment here. And if you want to play the detailed rules, you can play this way. And this is requires some very precise coordination between the layers of wood, because I want these to be smooth edges. I want the holes to all be aligned. In the single board version, I'm only cutting 1 set of holes, but here I have to cut 5 sets of holes. And the 6th is the backing. So I've got 5 sets of holes for the cribbage pegs. And so that's the issue. What can I do in SVG to help the design and build process to coordinate 6 SVG files that have to be precisely organized? This is what I have to create before I glue them together. And 5 of these have holes. They all have to be precisely aligned. Where I've got the finger holes are actually 1/4 inch bolts that are used to align, because at gluing time, I need alignment bolts that keep everything together so that when they're glued, they're not shifting when the glue dries and that kind of stuff. So I've got all of these things coordinated. I worked on the geometry so long. It was such fun. It was such fun. But then the actual came time to practically build this board, this 6-layer board. And my 6 SVG files need to have some properties. I mentioned the 0.001-inch lines that do the cutting. Well, it doesn't matter what color those lines are. So I had the idea that I would use magenta lines. And you can see here the very, very fine 0.001-inch lines that are on the masters. Now, they are hard to see, and I've got to try and coordinate all of these lines and edges and holes and all of that. It says, well, that's no good, not for my eyes. So how do I address the challenge of those cutting surfaces? And I thought, well, what if I made magenta lines of 1 millimeter stroke width, and really, that's the effective burn width, because I use 0.001 to specify the line, but the actual burn is 1 millimeter wide. So the designer, how do I know how close to put 2.001 lines that are going to end up burning each other, or overlapping unnecessarily? So, XSLT, What if I took my SVG file and I specified my magenta lines as 1 millimeter stroke width for design purposes, and then somewhere in the pipeline convert those to 0.001 inches for the burn? And that way, as a designer, I can comfortably look at the right-hand side of my page here. I've got this. This is my alignment hole for the for this guy. You can see I cut them off here, but I have the bolts going in here to align this while it's glued. And I've got these tabs on the middle piece of wood, and I've burned 2 sides. And the thinking to figure that out was such fun. And so now I've got, great. All I have to do is find every magenta line and change the stroke width to 0.001, and that part of the challenge is solved. Okay, next. How do I make sure that the 0.001 lines are all going to be in the same spot? And this is where I came up with a declarative screen. Now, this is going to be a bit lightweight for much of the audience here who's been working with declarative approaches for a long time. But for those of you who are new to declarative approaches, please mark down slide 10, because this summarizes how I approached my problem. I figured out a manual process, a system. I had a system that I had to follow, many steps I had to make. I designed all 6 layers in a single SVG file. Actually 7, because I've got 2 different backs. So I got 7 layers in the SVG file. And I have to selectively open that layer, make the modifications from 1 millimeter to 0.01. I need to shift it 90 degrees because of the geometry of the laser bed. I have to actually put the wood in sideways in order to burn it. And I have all of these many steps. Save that out as SVG, print the SVG to PDF, send the PDF to the printer. And so I would make mistakes. And the end result would cost me money, because here I am burning wood that I had to buy at the hardware store, and it wasn't coming out. And so and I'm human, I'm fallible, I'm going to be making mistakes. How can I automate this? Well, let's first figure out the system that I have to mimic. And I've got all of these steps here that I have to do. Next, I said, okay, can I abstract some semantic operators with operands that are going to take the pieces of information that I have and do the steps that I need done to get the result. And once I've determined those operators and operands, can I come up with a declarative syntax that engages those operators and operands so that I don't have to think about all of the steps. I can focus on the design. And I came up with the use of a colon inside tokens in order to, the identifier to the left of the colon mentions which layer I'm on. The identifier to the right of the colon is semantic. I get to describe whatever I want on the right-hand side. If the second token is an equal sign, that's kind of an assembly directive. But I can augment the assembly directive because remember, I need to, in my case, I need to rotate my assembly 90 degrees. I'm going to be creating many burn files because I really got carried away once I automated the system. There are many different versions of this board that you can create. I have 39 different burn files possible in order to create different versions of the game. And so I want to rearrange those in different subdirectories. So if some of the tokens have slashes in them, that tells me that it's a subdirectory, then to organize the files, and the remainder of the tokens are going to be put in a README file so that when I actually get the directories, I'm going to know which directory has which assemblies I need, and all of that, all done declaratively and implemented with XSLT that reads the XML of the SVG and does all the heavy lifting. So here I am running Inkscape. Who here has worked with Inkscape before? To know, okay. So I have the layer version on, listing on the right, and you can see that I have turned on the visibility for layers 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I can look at where the cuts are for all of these layers to feel reassured that they are all properly aligned. That when the cuts happen on these layers, my cavity inside here, I'm going to have a cavity. I want them all lined up. I want the tabs to be able to fit inside. And so I can look at all of this geometry and know that everything is there. Notice I've got layers 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, B1 for board 1. Notice that this one layer has all of the peg holes, and it belongs on layers 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4 as board number 2 for each one. It's also used in the print version of the, all done declaratively. Now I don't have to manually pull these together. I started having to do it manually because what I would do is I would say, okay, which are the boards for layer 3? And so here's layer 3, board 1, layer 3, board 2, layer 3, board 3, and voila. There is all of the pieces that I need to create level 3, or layer 3, in my laser cutter in order to do the rastering and the burning of the holes. So that's the manual process that I was going through. And I came up with this syntax where I create empty layers, and in the Inkscape title attributes, I encode what it is I want. I want to create, let's see, where's layer 3? Here we go. Layer 3 in a 9-inch by 12-inch frame that is assembled and subsequently turned 90 degrees clockwise with the frame 9 by 12 background and all of the L3 layers. So all of these tokens that begin L3 colon are found by the XSLT in order to create the assembly that makes this one called L3 frame 9x12 in the result file.
So that double arrow, that includes the semantics of rotating?
The right angle bracket.
Oh, it's a right angle bracket.
Yes,
okay.
yes. The equal sign is the assembly,
Okay.
and the right angle bracket is the rotation. There's another equal hash is called a collage. And in the paper, but not in my presentation, in the paper you'll read about collages because some laser cutters have large beds and I can cut up to 6 boards at a time. And I need a collage of my individual SVG files to be one SVG file for all 6 boards. And so that's another directive. Well, with XSLT, I can now read all of these. Oh, you can see my uses of slash here. So it's going to go into the frame directory. And this is going to go into the README file that's put into the frame directory. So when I'm looking at it standalone, I can see this as README. And I put all these files out in the direct. So my XSLT parses this line, implements all of the semantics of assembly plus rotation, and creates a new SVG file, which is called the review file. And in the review file, you can see that I have copied the assembly directives here for debug purposes. I am exposing only the assembly for L3 in the frame, and sure enough, that's what we saw when done manually. So now XSLT has automated that selective visualization of the individual layers that I need in order to make the PDF file. It's maintained the 1 millimeter stroke width so that I can visually tell what's there. It then creates a shell script that invokes the SVG, the version of the SVG file with the .001 in order to produce the PDF. And I end up with this file. And this file is my level 3. It's rotated 90 degrees. It has the .001 inch lines in there. So I could review them as being correct here and also see the effective cut width. And here, this is the specified cut width, and so that I know it's all going to work. And sure enough, I created all of my boards. I was able to create the assembly. I glued them all together. And as programmers know, when you write a system for one thing, how do you know it works? Well, the way you know it works is you create another game. So, my family rented a cottage this summer on Hay Lake. And this is the game called Revenge at Hay Lake. And in Revenge at Hay Lake, again, you have pegs that are in the thing, custom playing cards that I was able to get made that govern the play, and there are containers here for the pegs to be held, and it's all, and the discard pile goes in here with a reminder of the rules on the outside panels, and when you stick everything away, the top panels close, and the cards prevent these panels from going. Oh, the geometry was fun. Getting the geometry to work. Now, even my 5- and 7-year-old grandchildren love playing this game. It's a combination of Sorry, you remember Sorry for children, and Parcheesi, and Talk, and a whole bunch of, I asked ChatGPT, I showed ChatGPT my rules. 21 games it listed, and do you want more? Parcheesi, all of these games are all similar to what Revenge at Hay Lake is, but this is unique from them all. And what was darling was that at my wife's suggestion, we left a version of this game on the cottage owner's mantle for her to find when she comes back from a 6-month travel. And so she and her family are going to get to enjoy this. So I'll leave these out here for people to look at over lunch. So Revenge at Hay Lake. It's a pursuit game with good-natured revenge. As I just described. with custom playing cards, which I also did in SVG. Yeah, I won't go into detail. Okay, so I ended up having to create 2 tools. The first tool, convert bad strokes for design SVG. So I would find free SVG files, I'd pull them into my work. I would create, and they would have, unbeknownst to me, lines of 0.001 inch. So I'm expecting to raster this free image, and I send it to the machine, and I lose the wood because it cuts through the image. And so I'd have to pay for more wood. Okay, well, I solved that. Well, then I found that I would design something in one geometry, no 0.001 lines. I would then transform it, shrinking it, and my stroke width all of a sudden becomes 0.001, and you can see here how many of the numbers actually burn through the wood because something in that transformed image became 0.001, and I can't see that, but XSLT can see that. So I had to look up a whole bunch of geometry on doing matrix transforms and all that to find out which of my transforms were shrinking my stroke widths down to 0.001 inch and changing them to be 0.003 so that, again, I'm not going to see the difference. The user's not going to see the difference, but at least the laser cutter won't see the difference, or will see the difference and won't do the cutting. So you can see that I numerous pieces of board until I refined this one. I was spending money on birch, on white birch, trying to find out where all of these lines were. But XSLT, that allowed me to massage my XML that's in the SVG in order to get the result. Saves me money. This is the one that does the heavy lifting, design SVG to burn files. And it does work with both projects eventually. Like, it turns out I did have some presumptions in the version that I wrote for the baseball game. And so now that I've got it working general purpose, it works for both. And so it's freely available. If anyone doing SVG work, and especially if you're doing work for laser cutters, you might want to get in to use this. What this one style sheet does is it interprets my declarative syntax. That syntax that I came up. It interprets that and implements the semantics behind my imagined use of the tokens. It creates the single review SVG that I showed you with all of the assemblies with the human eye ability to do the review. It also creates all of the SVGs with the 0.001 lines in order to pass for the cutter. And it creates the shell script that's going to invoke Inkscape to convert the SVG into the PDF or PNG for preview that's then going to be sent to the laser cutter. And it does all of the heavy lifting. So those two are now available. And I took advantage of GitHub Actions. So I think this is a segue from the previous presentation talking about GitHub. All I have to do is edit the SVG, commit and push, and I get all of the burned files back as a release. It installs the required fonts. It installs Inkscape. It installs Saxon. It installs my style sheet from the separate repository so people can access just the style sheets, and then I pull that into my baseball game or my revenge game. It builds all of the print and burn files. It updates the repository so I can pull down the preview PNG files. It creates the package that's needed for the actions download so that I can pull down the PDFs. It even makes a release package and publishes that release so that when you go to the home page, you can go and look down and get either a QA release or a develop or a main. Yes, and if you should go to these websites, go to the QA branch, please, because the main branch might be a bit out of date. And so All that happens in about a minute and a half. My manual process that this replaced was taking me maybe 35, 40 minutes in order to create the files step by step, make sure to do everything correctly, review and all of that. And it's like a minute and 40 seconds on GitHub. And it's all up there. And I just download the release zip, take it to the library, pass it to the printer, and I create the outputs. So, to summarize, you take, what I did is I took the SVG syntax, found a construct where I could come up with some declarative syntax to represent a scheme of semantics to streamline the manual process that I had worked through manually. I abstracted that into semantics, came up with a syntax. It promotes consistency, it promotes reuse. The results are interoperable, everything fits, everything is lined up. The reason the peg holes line up is it's only one layer of peg holes. It just gets reused on every board. And so declarative approaches can be so useful. I know many of us here already know that, but maybe this is helpful for those who are not as familiar with declarative. It allowed me to automate all of the finicky steps, and it saved me money because I no longer worry about having to buy extra wood. And so these are the GitHub repositories where you can find the master set of style sheets and the baseball game on your left and the revenge game on your right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. That was very inspirational. Younes.
This is amazing. I've been doing electronics and robotics for a while now, and we've had a CNC machines all over the place, but nobody ever thought of this. It's always, okay, you've done with your electronics, just make a small box and shove everything in there. It was always like, just glue them together on this side. Well, this is amazing. Well, you know what else needs precision and not sticking out? So we usually make one layer of electronics and just take stuff together in Play-Doh. Yes. But if you want to make multi-layers, good luck doing that with anything. So let's burn a layer of that, place the electronics, glue it on top of the other, do that again, and voila, you have something that works. And you can always just unplug them and change stuff.
Yes.
Because it's not the final version.
That sounds excellent, yes.
Yeah, this is really amazing. I'm going to introduce this to a lot of people. Thank you so much for doing that.
I'm glad.
I know this is not related to XML or anything. I'm just going to say, hey, this guy makes amazing toys. And I think we can do that for that. If I say anything about XML, people are going to freak out.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm excited about other people possibly using this. I just wanted to share the fun I was having in my retirement. So,
thank you so much.
Any questions about the XML or the XSLT? Yes, Eric.
First of all, I love the simplicity of your solution. It's just two scripts, basically, or two files, and then it works. So it produces amazing results. So thank you for sharing this. I have just one question. I saw you devised your own DSL, which fits into a frame description.
I'm sorry?
You devised your own DSL, actually.
Oh, with the declarative syntax?
That fits into the frame description?
Yes.
And how did you actually parse and process it?
Analyze string and tokens. I just took, in XSLT, there are facilities that allow me to analyze the tokens that are on the line, that are found in the title attribute. And based on the second token having the equal sign, that's an assembly. And now there's a lot of options on that equal sign in order to tweak the end result. And the rest of the tokens, the use of the colon was helpful in being able to distinguish. So layer 3, board 1, layer 3, board 2, layer 3, board 3. So this allowed me, from a human perspective, to organize the information in my head and to both for me and for my XSLT to know that this one SVG layer of hole definitions is going to be reused on 5 different layers of wood. The single board front, the print version, are all going to have these peg holes. All based on that declarative syntax.
So is the railway security going to be done like this?
I don't know. I'm still wondering. I like your solution, but is it a crazy idea to think to use IXML for parsing that?
I'm in the middle of an SVG file, and I'm just looking at one attribute, so I do not need IXML for that.
Would it be possible, or?
Well, you can't integrate it in the middle of a style sheet process.
Yet.
It's a standalone.
Yet.
Yeah. Yet.
In the next version of the spec, there will be a function.
Oh, okay.
That you can call. Yeah.
Invoke it. So you could parse. So yeah, then you would be able to parse a much more complex syntax into an XML that you could then push through template rules in order to apply. So that sounds exciting.
It makes me think a little bit about how we, about 20 years ago, coded all kinds of information into file names.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah.
That's feasible.
I can understand that. Yep.
Anyone else?
Over here on
Yuri.
Yeah, amazing. I love board games, so this was
great.
very much. And I have played baseball, by the way.
Oh, wonderful.
Have you thought about extending Inkscape itself by a plugin to maybe encode all these extra information in extra attributes?
I am not familiar enough with Inkscape to know to do that. So that has not occurred to me. But so what are you picturing?
This is just XML, right? And you can code plugins, and that can modify the XML. So you could add extra attributes in extra namespaces and all of that jazz.
Yes, but think that this is all an output process. I do not take advantage of the assemblies in the design thought process. Everything is encoded in these assembly directives. So they do not need to be persistent. I do not need to modify the SVG with properties that would then be exploited later. This is all on a publish kind of pipeline that I press the button, say, now's the time to take my design and create the burn files. So I'll have to think about what persistence I might need inside the SVG, because then, yes, an Inkscape plugin would allow me to modify my SVG structure in memory and save it out to have some information that's persistent. But up until now, I haven't needed persistence between 2 different design versions.
I was thinking along the line that with such a plugin, you could actually show those different layers, like the assembly, in Inkscape itself.
Oh, does that plugin allow you? Is it interactive? Like, could I see layer 3?
Yes, this is possible.
Ah.
So you have UI, you can expose UI in plugins, and then.
Okay, because that would replace my my review SVG. This is this is the static result of all of the declarative constructs being interpreted, and I just look at one or look at the other, and I can review each of the assemblies in this one SVG file. So yes, this would be replaced by an interactive version if I had a plugin.
Could be, potentially.
Yes, yes. Fascinating, thank you.